So I just want to walk through some kind of basic things about lighting and hopefully kind of just make you more aware of what's happening and also give you some terminology. All right. So this is brand new. You guys are the first to get this because I just put it together. But I felt like there were probably some basic things that you needed to sort of understand that are not necessarily in the videos. You're probably aware that of the electromagnetic spectrum, right? So on the, everything is a wave, right? So light is a wave. It's also a particle, but the lower frequency waves are radio, right? And FM and AM are different. Microwave, infrared, and then there's visible light, which we can actually see because we can't see these other ones, right? Then there's ultraviolet, which is why we're supposed to wear sunscreen. X-rays. I just had one on my hand last week. And then gamma rays, okay? So this is what we're going to talk about because the visible light spectrum is the only thing that we can see, okay? So within visible light, there are different wavelengths that have different colors associated with them, and we call those color temperature. So probably without thinking about it, you notice the difference between different kinds of light. So let me talk about these. So one of the ones that you've probably noticed is light bulbs in your house. So you can actually buy light bulbs these days that are either cool and what they call daylight, or they're warm and they're more like the old incandescent lights like we used to use back in the day. Okay. And of course, these are CFL lights, but the same thing would apply to LED. So when you go to buy LED bulbs or products, you want to choose the kind of light that you want. Some people really, really like this kind of light in their house. They like things to be real warm and cozy. I kind of like the clarity of more daylight, but that's just a personal preference in terms of the kinds of lights that I have in my house. So here's another thing here where you can just see the spectrum, right? So basically the visible spectrum goes from very red to very blue light. Okay, so you got your red, orange, yellow, and then you move into blue and green. So we talk about warm light and cool light. So the warm tones tend to be the ones that have a lot of red and orange and yellow in them. The cool tones have a lot of blue and green. So you will notice that at different times of the day, the color outside is very different. So in the morning, when the sun first comes up, it's very sort of orangey, right? And then as the sun rises, it gets more and more blue. So that by the middle of the day, it's a full spectrum, very blue light. And then as the sun starts to go down, then it gets more orange again, especially, like on a clear day, you get those really awesome sunsets and that kind of thing. And color temperatures are measured in degrees Kelvin. So just like we say Celsius or Fahrenheit, there's also Kelvin as a way to measure the color of light. And so that has to do with where it lands on the spectrum. So we talk about, 500 to 6,500 K, that would be Kelvin. Okay. So in film, you'll notice that they tend to use a lot of blue light in very specific ways. One would be to create sort of a mysterious feel. It tries to emulate nighttime or scary situations. This one right here actually has more green in it than this one. And I'll talk about some examples of green light in a minute, but you can see that these create a certain particular effect. These are examples of lighting from fluorescent lights, because fluorescent lights are very green on the spectrum. And so when they use fluorescent lighting in films, it tends to give a very sort of gritty feel. So, I mean, you can just see these looking at these, right? That it's got a very sort of natural feel. You can tell there's not added light in there. They're just going with the straight fluorescent lighting, which is very unsexy, very flat, very sort of bizarre. I mean, because, you know, in nature, we don't have a lot of green light, right? So it also adds this sort of kind of mystique. As opposed to that, very warm light gives a very sort of cozy feeling. So they talk about something in film called the golden hour. And the golden hour is actually not even a whole hour. It's a few minutes at the end of the day where they try to shoot particular kinds of scenes. Okay. So the golden hour, you have to figure this out. Exactly when that's going to happen, and everybody's set up and ready to go. Hope, can you turn off your microphone? I think your mic there. Thank you. So you see that feel here again. Here's some examples of the golden hour, where it's that very special time of day when the sun is just super orange, and it creates a certain feel within a film. And so sometimes if there's a longer scene that needs to be shot during the golden hour, they'll actually have to do it over several days, because they can only get so much done in, 15 or 30 or 60 minutes. We like the golden hour, don't we? We like sunsets. We like that because it has emotionally, it has a very sort of comforting, sort of warm feeling. One of my favorite films is called Babette's Feast. Babette is a very French name, and it's a French-Danish film that was released in the 1980s. And I first saw it at an art theater when I was going to grad school on the East Coast. And so the whole thing is shot in Denmark. And if you know anything about like Northern Europe, the winters are very sort of long and cold and very, very blue, because they have a lot of overcast days. And so the film is shot there, but then there's this character her name is Babette. She comes from France, and she ends up having this very redemptive sort of influence on these two women that she takes care of, and also their religious community. And so you see this huge contrast within the film of this sort of very stark blue light in the Danish along the Danish Sea, and then in Denmark along the sea, and then the contrast of that with Babette and the love and the warmth and the generosity that she brings into this community, and by making them a very special meal. She actually won the lottery in France and got a huge amount of money, and she spent it all on this one community as an act of love. And so you see here in the kitchen, she's been preparing this meal. It's very warm. You've got the fire, you've got the fruits and so forth, and you can just see the difference in the lighting there. Yeah. Lighting can be used in very interesting ways to sort of create unnatural feelings. Red is not something that we see a lot of, and so sometimes you'll see horror films where they bring in red. A lot of films that try to create this sort of bizarre underworld actually mix different colors of light. So these are some great examples of that, where because in the natural world, we would never see anything quite like that. Not really. And so by mixing these different colors of light, they can create this sort of bizarre feeling. And it's interesting that in this particular character, she's very blue, which, gives the sense of sadness or melancholy, as opposed to a very warm background. And so, we could even create a narrative. I haven't seen this film. I don't know what film this is from, but I would suspect that she is living her life in contrast to the rest of the world around her, that maybe the rest of the world around her is very sort of happy and content, and she is feeling alone or blue or that kind of thing. We even say blue, feeling blue, right? Feeling blue. Yeah, interesting, huh? Dick Tracy is a film that was released in the early 1990s. And it was interesting because the director chose a particular palette. So when a cinematographer starts thinking about how they're going to shoot a film, they generally choose a palette, okay? And they work with the costume people and the set people and the lighting people all to create a particular look. And what was interesting about this film is they totally went with primary colors. So, Colin, what are the primary colors?
Yellow, blue, and red, right?
Yes. So, have you guys ever like played with a prism? If you get a prism and the light shines through it, it actually creates, you actually see different distinct colors. And those are the colors that come out of that. Red, yellow, and blue, was it? Yeah. And so what they did was, just to create a sort of comic book feel to this film, they went with totally primary colors. And isn't it interesting, because like when you go to a comic book, it's going to be a lot of primary colors. Oh, I don't know, like the ones now, but traditionally they mix a lot of colors. And so all the other colors come out of these three basic ones, right? You guys know that, right? Y'all took art and you like mixed up different paints, like to get different colors and stuff, right? Think about where light comes from. So generally in our lives, where does light come from?
I'd say like sunlight, or I mean modern day inside, like, yeah.
Okay, so where's the sun? Is it above or below us?
Above.
It's above us, right? So to us, lighting from above seems natural. So in our houses, we often have lights that reflect off the ceiling, right? Or we have lights at the top of our rooms, right? So the light comes down. So when you turn that around and you light from below, like these examples, you get a very sort of ominous, scary effect. Remember when you were a kid and you take a flashlight and you'd put it under your chin and you'd shine it up because you were trying to look scary, right? That's because you were going against what is natural. And when we go against things that are natural, they tend to have a sort of a jolting effect on us. So even if you don't use color, if you light from below, you can create that feeling, right? Here we have the Joker, which the lighting is kind of from the side, kind of from below, but then also we can't see the eyes, right? So very, very deep pockets, which is both a product of lighting and makeup. And then here we have this is from Psycho, and we'll watch a scene from Psycho when we get into the editing section of the course. But by backlighting, there's all we have here is this bathroom light kicking a little bit of light on the side of this character, and we can't see any detail here. So it creates this sense of mystery. Like, I don't know who that is or what I'm looking at. So this is basic lighting. So generally, if you're going to like some of you may have been in a professional photography shoot where they didn't just have one light, or if they did have a light, it was using an umbrella that sort of sent the light in different directions. 3-point lighting is basically this: a key light, and that's your brightest light, and you would shine that key light on your subject. But if you just shine that light, then there would be very deep shadows on the other side of the face, right? And so you have a fill light. And the fill light is not as strong as the key light, but it helps it so that it's not completely dark. And then a backlight is what you use to shine on the subject to separate them from the background. Because if you just had these the key and the fill light, and you didn't have a background, the subject tends to blend into the background. So let me show you some examples. So take this bottom right picture is just the natural light in a particular situation. Okay, so very, oh, terrible, right? Not good lighting. Then they put the key on, and the key can be from either side. Okay, generally it's at a sort of a 45-degree angle, but it doesn't have to be. But so this is a little bit backward from the last here we have the key light on the left. Here we have the key light on the right. So it's shining onto his face, and you can see what it's doing. See it, see the 3D molding that's going on. Then we've got, let's see, the fill light, and the fill light, like I said, is less intense than the key light, and it's on the other side. The backlight or the rim light is what's used to actually shine, like on a person, it would shine on the head and the shoulders to separate it from the background. Sometimes they use a bounce light, which is something sort of coming from below or from another angle, just to sort of round out the effect. And then you see here when all these come together, that's a really nicely lit face. Yeah. Now, if we just put one light on this person from the front, that would tend to make him look very flat and pasty. You want to get a 3D molding effect. You guys are probably familiar with flash photography. The reason that flash photography, like on a point and click or camera or your phone, it's because that light is just hitting straight on, and you don't get that molding like you do when you do a proper setup. Here's some examples as well. And here you can see this, you can make somebody look so different just depending on what kind of light you use. So this light on the left, where's the light coming from? Can anybody tell? Where's the key light? Casey?
On the left one,
Yeah.
it looks like 45 degrees to our left.
Yeah. Yeah. So coming at her this way, right? And it's very sort of, it's not a very warm light. It's quite cool, isn't it? Then you get to these other ones. This one, it's a much cooler light. I think it's more straight on because she tends to look a little bit flatter, doesn't she, than she does over here. And then this light, we have a very strong key. This picture on the right, we've got a stronger key on the left, which makes for this very interesting effect on the side of her face. Reflectors are a cool thing to use, and they're often used in photography and in filmmaking, because when you just shoot outside, you're only getting sun from one particular source, the sun, right? And so a lot of times they'll use what's called a reflector to sort of round out and fill out the lighting. Let me just stop sharing for a second. I'm sitting next to a window, right?
Yeah, it looks like
Yeah.
natural light.
There's the window. So it's just coming in straight at my face, which, because there's no light on my other side or here, because there's no light over here, this side is kind of dark, which, you know, could be okay. But I could use a piece of paper to bounce light on my face. Just something, see that, just something that easy. And it can kind of fill in. And you know, you have to play around with where it works, but that's definitely an effect you can use. Okay, by the way, the other day when I was talking about my rim light, I got some of my concepts a little bit backwards. So this is a little light that I bought that you can use with camera, with Zoom calls and stuff like that, right? So it's just a little USB light. So right here is one color. Then there, see the blue? That's very much like daylight, right? And then this is quite orange. That's very much like indoor lighting. And that first one that I had on actually combines both of them. Now I could use the light as a fill as well, right? So because I'm getting outside light, which is daylight, I'd probably want to use, I'm using the blue setting, right? So I could play around with whether that would work, or I could make myself look very scary, right? And so cinematographers, they play with all this stuff. And see, I'm a glasses wearer, so that can be a problem. Now I have, I'm not sure these are anti-reflective, but a lot of times you can, like if I'm doing an interview or something, I could like just, you tilt them up off the back of the ear a little bit, and you can sometimes get rid of that. Lighting is fascinating. And it's quite the skill. Here's a good example. Now you need to know that different amounts of light get absorbed in different contexts. So lighter skin tends to reflect a lot of light. Darker skin tends to absorb a lot of light. And so it can be really tricky when you're working with people with very different skin tones in the same scene. Okay. And here you can see this is another example where bounce light was really necessary in this situation because we just lose this whole side of this guy's face. Here are some examples of reflectors being used in a film. So you see these ones down here. So those would be bouncing light up. I think those are the only ones in this scene. This one is actually just a big diffuser on a light. Here's an example. They often use these very big ones outside, or they will actually shoot people under a great big canopy that actually diffuses the light, because outside light can be tricky to work with. Now you can see that in this scene, it's a very sort of cloudy day. And so that can be difficult to get the molding and stuff, because everything, the light tends to be very flat. If you go outside on a cloudy day, everything just seems kind of flat, right? Whereas if you go out on a sunny day, you've got very big contrasts. If you shoot against a bright background, your iris on your camera tends to go way down, and it makes your foreground look very dark. Okay. So in this instance, how would you fix this situation? Now, if you wanted to take this photograph as an effect the way it is, that's one thing, right? But what if you wanted to shoot this kid and the window? What are some of your solutions you could come up with? Anybody have any ideas?
Are you talking about getting them both in focus or just getting them both well lit?
Well lit, so that we could actually see the face.
Well, yeah, there's no key light, is there? So
No.
we need to add that and a fill, and then the backlight would probably be low, right?
He's probably already got a backlight on him, really.
Was it on the other
Yeah.
side of the window?
So the window's behind him, right? You got a little bit of light on him coming from the back. Okay, what if you didn't have any lights and you wanted to shoot this kid by a window? What else could you do?
Turn him.
Turn him, okay?
Yeah, just shoot from the kind of opposite angle.
Do a profile.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this woman, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, all you got to do is turn it around. Now, it wouldn't get the same effect. If you're trying to get this interesting glass window, that would probably not be possible, or whatever maybe those are curtains, I'm not sure. But yeah, you turn it so that the light is actually coming in on the subject as opposed to being behind it. This is something you got to pay attention to when you're shooting, especially with everything being auto iris now, because cameras and phones will tend to go with what it thinks it needs to do. And so like it sees all this light, and so it shuts the iris down, just like your eyes. You guys know that, right? So if you're around really bright lights, what happens to your irises? They go down really small, right? Whereas when you're in a dark situation, your irises on your eyes have to open up big to let more light in. If you've got a dark face with a light background, the camera's going to shut down that iris, and that face is going to seem even darker, right? Likewise, if you take a very light-skinned face and put it next to a black background, the camera's going to think there's not much light there, and so it tends to blow out the face. Okay, does that make sense? It would tend to overexpose the face. And of course, with professional equipment, you've got a lot more options for tweaking things. But when we go into using automatic settings in equipment, then it can be a bit dicey, but it is getting better. Casey.